What happens when love isn't enough to take away someone's pain? When you're forced to watch a loved one suffer, powerless to fix it, how do you keep going? Today we welcome Camille Block, an author, advocate, and a caregiver who has absolutely walked this road and found purpose in the struggle. In her new book, Hope for Secondhand Suffering, she shares the tools and the truths that she's learned while caring for her own brother, Kevin, who has cerebral palsy. This episode is for the weary, the selfless, and the ones holding it all together. If you've ever felt unseen in your own pain, this conversation will speak right to your heart. Stay with us.
All right. Well, I'm super excited for this one, Camille Block. We've been friends for a while now. And I've been hearing about this story for quite a long time and how it's been evolving. And I can't wait for the audience to hear about this. And when I shared it with Dr. Spencer, he just gave me a double thumbs up. So I'm really excited that this is something a lot of people go through. So I'm really excited to have you on our show.
Glad to be here.
So the story that we've all been going through is you've been a caregiver of a special needs brother, obviously your whole life. And a lot of people are out there are suffering. And in fact, you wrote a book and about the secondhand suffering. So can you share the pivotal moment when you assumed the role of a caregiver for your brother, Kevin, and the initial challenges you did face and how you navigated these in the early days? Because a lot of people think of the parents as a caregiver. You're the sister that's a caregiver.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. My brother was born about 3.5 years after I was, and they didn't quite know what was going on, but they knew something was a little off. And so I remember as a young girl, big sister to him, feeling very important in his life. Like I was his protector. And because the word that they used before the word special needs existed, they called him special. And he was. And I kind of just had this love, just incredible love connection with him at an early age. So my job was to sit with him watching Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers or Romper Room and hold his head up because his head drooped to the right. And he had a special chair because he couldn't ever sit up on his own. We didn't really know exactly all the details of what was right, but what was going on. But basically, he ended up having a diagnosis of cerebral palsy. We didn't realize how severe it would be at the time, but I would say I wasn't his caregiver as a child. I was his protector. I felt very connected, but he ended up being placed in a home at age 3.5, actually, which was kind of sadly what they did back in the early 70s. And so that's a whole story. But as you asked, the moment I became his caregiver in my adult life is really probably the question, because I was more on the outside looking in as a child, living almost a double life. But my heart was always connected with him in a deep way. But as an adult, I got married and had 3 kids and all that. But it was when my mom kind of left the picture and my dad kind of took over. My mom had dementia and some strokes that was really bad, but kind of around the time when I would say the mid 2010 timeframe, I really started kicking in and becoming an advocate for my brother. And then a few years later, became a co-medical conservator with my dad. And so I'd say my adult life, it's probably been the last 15 years that I've been a pretty darn involved sister, medical conservator, and advocate for my brother. Caregiver is hard for me to say because he's not living with me. The people that care for him are the people that are hired by the group home / institution where he lives. And I have great respect for them. But I'm not doing the day-to-day, but the emotional day-to-day, yes. The advocacy, yes. The fight for his life, fight for his rights, fight for pretty much everything. Yes, I'm a caregiver in that sense.
Well, let's parlay off of that, because there's been so many times when you and I have gathered that you're just distraught with all the stuff that you have to fight for just for this poor man to have as normal of a life as he possibly can, which would be the advocacy that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. What strategies and stuff that you have had to fight for that a lot of people maybe not think about when it comes to if they have someone in their life in a similar situation. Man, you've gone to bat for this, your brother. Can you, empower some people that are listening of what you have gone through?
Yeah, I can do my best here. It's been so many things, so many diverse things, but I would say the number one thing that comes to mind is medical health. And my brother is nonverbal; he has no voice, literally. And so, when I really kicked in as a caregiver slash advocate in the medical area was probably 2017, 16, somewhere in there, and he had a progressively worse pain that was an obvious pain where he was screaming, like screaming, turning red in these episodes where like nobody knew what was going on. And I remember visiting him and the caregivers, the staff there saying, "Oh, we think he just wants attention." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? No, he's in pain. Can you not tell?" And so they didn't know. They had other people to take care of. And so I started realizing something was really wrong. And it turned into eventually affecting his oxygen level and all his vitals, which then they're under licensing to send him to the ER. So then from the ER, we went on an 8-week journey in the hospital. And it was a combination of hospital and skilled nursing. And he continued having unknown pain and screaming fits. And my brother is a really pretty joyful guy, given his situation, beautifully joyful. And something was really wrong. And nobody could figure out what it was. The doctors couldn't, the nurses, the staff, and there's only so much they can do. And so my dad and I couldn't leave him. My dad and I took turns. And for 8 weeks, straight weeks, we were by his side. And that was a very, very hard time, very dark time. And for the most of the time, the first half, I was a victim. I was like, I don't know what to do. I just know we have to fix this. We can't leave him in pain. And so they do what they could to make him comfortable and have moments of joy and moments of like contentment. And then he would do it again. I'm like, something's wrong. And I probably halfway through that 8 weeks, I started realizing that it was in his gut. And so he would have relief when I push on his gut. And so basically the very long story short is it was a very dark time. I didn't understand that I had just as much authority as the doctors in terms of knowing my brother, not in terms of medical training, of course, but I knew something was wrong in my gut. And I started trusting my instinct. And he was in a skilled nursing one day and it just got too much. We were doing deep suctioning because he had aspiration pneumonia. I mean, he looked like he was dying. And I finally told all the skilled nursing people, I need to get him out of here. He needs to go to a hospital. Something is wrong. And I requested a hospital different than the one before, which was closer to our home. We got there. I got to know all the right doctors. I actually ended up firing some doctors. It was like when they said, "Oh, we don't know." And I'm like, "Well, you know what? You need to know." And so I just, I got fire in my belly. And I ended up realizing that I think it's his G-tube formula because it was coming from his gut. So I ended up looking at the ingredients and I realized he's getting fed corn syrup and there's nothing redeeming. They're feeding him in his G-tube. So I went on a battle, it ended up 9 months, but basically that was when I turned the corner and I felt like, you know what? I figured this out. And it ended up, I was right. I got everybody in line. I had to fight for insurance to cover it, but I fought for a different G-tube formula. And it sure enough, that ended up being the solution. So that's the big story where the shift happened when I realized I can trust my gut. I'm not a victim. The doctors aren't always the experts, especially with someone you love and you know them. And that kind of changed my whole confidence of my role in my brother's life. So there's many stories, but I'd say the medical one is still to this day something I'm doing. And now, I think he's healthier than he's ever been. But it's because I'm asking the questions, I'm getting the second opinions, I'm getting the third opinions, I'm fighting insurance. I'm going with my gut. And my gut tends to be right on my brother. And it's been, I'll let you ask more questions, but I can share more stories. That's the one that kind of is the big one of the turning point.
Before Dr. Spencer jumps in, I want to go back because you said he has no voice. He can't speak, yet you got him into an eye gaze technology. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about that? Because so now you can communicate with them and that was so powerful.
Well, literally, I'm in the middle of that right now. We just showed him yesterday this new equipment. It still has to be programmed and set up. It's going to be a journey. I need to hire a trainer. But yeah, I mean, we played around with it a little bit, and his eyes, he's always had great communication with his eyes. And so again, I had to fight for the right to be tested on this. There was a whole journey in that. It's been since 2019. We were ready to have all this ready to go in 2020, and then they shut everything down and we couldn't see him for 14 months. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, so right now he has a piece of equipment that if he can be trained, which I believe 100% he can, he passed the test. We can program this device with pictures and words, and we can try to teach him what they mean. He can't read or anything, so a lot of times it's going to be pictures, but if he stares at it for a certain number of seconds that we can program, 2 to 3, where we know he's actually holding a stare, it will then speak what he wants. And I'm excited. I don't know. I mean, I've kind of learned this nonverbal language with him, and I think a lot of his staff does. He smiles, he cries, he can look like he's in pain. So we've kind of figured out, but how much better would it be if he can say, I actually, I'm hungry, or I want to watch a TV show, or I want to see my sister, or things like that. And so I'm excited.
How old is Kevin?
He's 54.
Isn't that great? You could, teach an old dog new trick. Not that he's old.
Yeah.
I'm old, but you can teach an old dog new tricks, and that you don't give up. And I think that in itself deserves a lot of merit. So thanks for sharing that. You said something about a G tube. Could you explain to our lay audience how he is actually fed?
Yes, and that's a whole nother story. But yes, a G tube is basically a hole in your stomach where you can put a tube in, and there's different types of G tubes. They're called different things: J tube, G tube, and for my brother, it goes right into his stomach. So basically you can feed him formula, liquid, medicines, everything through the tube. So the story with my brother is, and this was before I became an advocate, I was probably away living when I first got married in Bay Area, and when this happened. But my brother kept getting aspiration pneumonia, and the doctors at the time, of course, things have changed. The GI doctors at the time said, "Oh, you need to just take away all food and drink, and because that's a risk of aspiration pneumonia. He's having this too much, and let's just feed him through a G tube." And my parents were that generation, trust the doctor, and there's truth. He was also losing weight. He was I think he was like in the 80-pound range. Like he wasn't getting enough nutrition. But to me, I would challenge that and say, well, maybe it's because the staff doesn't have the time to take the time to actually feed him, because he loved to eat. He absolutely loved to eat and drink. So it might be a different issue than just he's not getting enough nutrition. Maybe there's a timing issue, like how much they're stopping feeding him before he's done. So if I was there and my now self back then, I probably would have asked those questions, but I wasn't in the picture in terms of having a vote at all at that stage. So they put this in, and they actually took away all food and drink, and that's when my empathy kicked up to the highest level, and I knew and he was so sad. This was one joy in life. So it turns out later, fast forward, G tubes are just as much the cause of aspiration pneumonia as regular food and swallowing. He was getting it even when he had the G tube, and he wasn't eating and drinking. So I then went on a fight to get him his food back. So oral gratification now is part of his life. He has 3 meals a day. This has been a long journey, but we're finally, like, he's with people. I've said this is a social event. This is not just like put him in a closet and feed him like a spoonful of applesauce. This is like a real meal. So I've been working with a doctor, and so now he can have 3 meals a day and even some snacks. And oh my gosh, it's made such a difference, his quality of life. But he still has a G tube, and it's helpful for medications. For times, I've got him on a whole food-based now formula, which that was a whole nother battle. But yeah, he's healthier because of what we're putting in his body now. And he's having the oral gratification joy of actually eating real food now.
Camille, since our perspective of our podcast is oftentimes mental, nutritional, physical, I want to ask you a little bit about the nutritional thing that you were so sharp in identifying. And was he, since the onset of the G tube, were they feeding him the same formula every day?
Oh yeah, the formula of corn syrup. Yes. That was the first G tube. Then I fought for another formula later, because they don't let you have the one you really want at first. They make you try each one, and progressive over the years. And if they fail, then you can't just use logic and say, these ingredients is what I want. it's proven it's healthy. You can't do that. You have to like try all the crappy ones, first, and then before you get to the good stuff.
There's something to be said about having the same thing every single day. And I'm sure you develop these sensitivities to, well, especially something as like corn syrup. I mean, you can't imagine every day. But anyway, that's a interesting point that we can take in our own healthy lives, that we are creatures of habit, and eating the same thing every day can develop
Mm,
food sensitivities to begin with, and we don't even
that's a
know
good
why we're
point.
getting
Yeah.
sick. So thanks. Just wanted to parlay that into what our listeners might be experiencing on their own. But
Hmm.
thank you for sharing that. Now, one of the other challenges that a lot of our listeners and viewers have is multitasking. Some of us are not very good multitaskers. Some of us are great at multitasking, but you have this massive distraction off to one side, not to mention you have 3 children, and a husband and your own life. How do you prioritize your own mental and physical health amidst all these massive responsibilities?
Yeah.
How do you do it?
Well, thank you. Yeah, back when, like the example I gave you when he was in the hospital, I didn't do it well. It was bad, actually. In fact, I got to the darkest point in my life where I had never understood what it meant to feel so dark that you didn't want to go on. That's where I was in that 8-week journey. It was so dark. So I didn't do it well then. And I think I learned from that. I write in my book that like you have to take care of yourself. So I think that acute illnesses, acute issues with your loved ones that come up and you're fighting into, I think we can do that. I think we have adrenaline. Sometimes things have to go. You don't get your exercise in. You don't, I'm not really super great at exercise, by the way, but I do try to move, and I'm doing better with that. But I think sleep is huge. I think the multitasking, sometimes we can't do it all in one day. I think I've learned it's over seasons, almost like the stock market. It can go up and then down, but ultimately it evens out. You got to take care of yourself more on a week, let's say, basis. Every day, like one day I might be stuck in the hospital all day with my brother, or I might be, stuck doing something else. But overall, you have to kind of watch that, or you go dark. So for me, I've learned I'm like a three-legged stool, we body, soul, spirit. And so if you ignore any one of those for any length of time too long, you collapse. And so strengthening my body with movement, or feeding it good food, eating healthy, getting sleep, huge. Having so that's kind of body is obvious. That's what you guys talk about a lot. But my soul is more the kind of my mind, emotional health, the mental health, I would say, and that that can be helped with community, good friends. I have a good set of solid friends who rally with me, who pray for me if I'm going through a battle. I think emotionally, just becoming more self-aware. I learning like what my triggers are, and my husband's triggers, my kitten, learning how to kind of relate more emotionally healthy. And then the spirit is my spiritual side. And, I think we all have a spiritual journey. I think sometimes we repress that, or we don't really acknowledge it until maybe we're later in life and we're like, wait, what the heck is next? And so I think going on a spiritual journey has really helped me as well. And so my book kind of incorporates all three of those.
Great. You mentioned community. We are social beings, and community is so important. How do you find the right people to surround yourself with? And talk about the importance of having a good social circle,
Mm.
especially someone that in your with all your responsibilities. How do you do it?
I think that if you stay in one area for a long time and you raise kids in that area, I've met a lot of my closest friends through the local schools that we've been in together. I think for me, church has been a big part of my life. Finding people who have similar beliefs and ways of looking at life has been helpful. I think I've made a lot of mistakes, and I used to want to be everybody's friend and everybody like me, and it's like that was exhausting. So I've learned, like, I just narrowed down. I have a really nice set of close friends that are local that we get together. In fact, I'm missing a meeting right now with them because I'm here. But that consistent meeting, the book clubs, the Bible studies, the social events, these are all so important to me. And obviously family is wonderful, but my husband, my kids, they can't meet all my needs. I'm a complicated person. I need a diversity of people in my life. And I love to talk. I love to engage. And so I think just, I don't know if I have any great secret to that, although you have to be a friend to have good friends. So I've invested my life in being there for my friends and with no strings attached. And so when the times come when I need a friend, I've already earned the right, to ask for help or to have friends. You have to give to receive. If you're just looking for friends to like, hey, I want my needs met, that's not going to be a real authentic friendship. It's both. It goes both ways.
Good. I want to talk about secondhand suffering that most people don't realize and they're going through it, but they don't realize that there's actually like a title to it, and
there wasn't until
yeah,
recently.
until you figured it out. But secondhand stuff, we've heard of secondhand smoke, we've heard of but secondhand suffering is very unique and it resonates deeply for a lot of people. What coping mechanisms have you found to be effective that you could share with others that might need that emotional support?
I think the very first thing is just recognizing that there is a name now. And I think sometimes when we name something, we can deal with it. I've heard it, name it to tame it or whatever. But I feel like when I've been on this discovery, when I've told people before the book came out, I was telling people, they're like, what's your book about? I'm like, how do I describe it? And I was stumbling over words. And finally, when I just read the title to them, it's about hope for secondhand suffering, tools for the heart when you can't fix your loved one's pain. What I got, the reaction was like, oh my gosh, I get that. Like, oh. And they like, some people would literally, I had one guy get a tear in his eye. And this is an executive guy, business guy. And he got a tear in his eye. He's like, you've just nailed something. And he said, he's not even a super spiritual guy. He just said, like, there's an anointing on that name. Like there's something powerful that, and that's what I found. I feel like this phrase seems so simple, but like you said, secondhand smoke, we used to think it was only the smoke that affected the smoker, but we learned that actually later it was anybody in their vicinity that could suffer from smoke. In the same way, people that are around us, like I look like normal. I seem, quote, in quote, it's normal. What on the outside appears fine. On the inside, I'm actually having a mental breakdown, because I can't fix my loved one. And it's not just with, a disabled brother. My mom had dementia, I watched my best friend die of cancer almost 2 years ago. And I watched her husband go through this. Like it's anytime we're feeling like that silent anguish or heavy emotional burden that grips our hearts when we're walking alongside someone with a deep pain or suffering or chronic illness or something, and we really can't fix it. Like we can do stuff and we can help in advocacy, and I'm not taking away from advocacy, but ultimately there's some things like that we have to just surrender and we're there for them. So I think in terms of tools, I feel like the first thing is just knowing that it's real, knowing that you're not alone, that like people like me who wrote a book, and I'm sure many others in the world, we're all going through it. We understand it. You look fine on the outside, but we know you're hurting. And I think just acknowledging that it's a thing, giving visibility to the invisible it takes that edge off. Like, oh, I'm not alone. Someone sees me. I am feeling this. It's valid. And then I think then we get into the tools like being an advocate. There are things you can do. And when you do certain things, even if they're small, they make a statement to that feeling that we're going through. Like, okay, I'm not completely powerless. There's some things I can do. And so it's that serenity prayer, where, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, but then the courage to change the things I can, and then the wisdom to know the difference. I think that knowing that alone is helpful as a secondhand suffering. There's some things we can do. There's some things we can't. I think the big thing for me, and I write about this in the book, is as dealing with guilt. I think secondhand sufferers have a lot of guilt, and sometimes they're serving constantly out of guilt, like, oh, I'm not suffering, so I better help them. And to the point that you become the sufferer, because you're giving so much that you're not taking care of yourself. And so I talk about breaking up with guilt and fear. And for me, one of the guilt things I dealt with was, I always had this voice in my head, like when I was doing something fun or happy, or it's laughing, or it's super happy and experiencing some kind of joy. I had this voice in my head saying, why are you happy? Your brother can't do that. Who are you to experience joy when he can't? Why are you quote normal and he's not? Why did, he have the life he has and you get to do everything? How dare you experience happiness? That's the voice I grew up with all my life to this day. That's the invisible secondhand suffering I'm talking about. People don't understand what the loved one of someone going through this is actually experiencing on a day-to-day basis. I mean, and I just, there's so many more, but one more I'll just throw out there is somehow I've learned when you embrace the pain and you push through what you're going through, but not around, you can actually come through the other side feeling lighter, feeling better, feeling more joyful, and feeling more content in that tension of heartache. You could still find the joy when you push through and not around, and you don't avoid it. You don't mask it. You don't pretend it doesn't exist. And you could find that purpose out of your pain. Sometimes the purpose is not to solve the problem. Sometimes the purpose is just to sit in the pain, walk through it with someone, and then find meaning out of it. For me, I got a book here, I can help people and I can talk about this. Other people, they might, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, they found a purpose out of their pain. So sometimes, not always, but sometimes you can kind of make a bigger difference in the world for either you, your loved ones, or greater.
It's always been fascinating. We, through these podcasts, we've interviewed people that are very genius in their area of expertise and their specialty. And I've noticed over the years that we've been doing this podcast that people are motivated by one of two things. They're motivated or inspired away from pain or towards pleasure. And it's one or the other. That's what I mean. We'll delve into, other areas, but it's usually one that dominates. And you mentioned just a moment ago that you would have guilt about why was I the chosen one to be healthy and happy and laughing and so. And then my brother, what would you think at that very moment that it would turn things around and make you okay or make you, feel?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one I've only learned recently, very, very recently. But I have a friend, two friends actually gave me this example. I think the root of it was with one, but she said, imagine a pie. Like you have a pie, you're given at birth, you get this delicious pie. It's probably a bad example because it's full of chemicals and stuff, but let's pretend it's everything good in it. And it represents everything good, joyful things in your life. And it's yours. It's only for you. My brother gets his own pie. And what my friend said is, you can't give your brother pieces of your pie. It doesn't help him. He can't have it. He has his own pie. There's nothing you can do. You can't give it away. So when I'm denying myself eating the pie, it's silly. It doesn't make any sense. I might as well enjoy the pie that I was given. And I have legs. I have eyes. I can do stuff. Don't feel like it's a false sense of guilt because it does no good. It only hurts me with the guilt burden. And when you're giving things out of guilt, it's a negative. It doesn't help. So when I heard that, I'm like, oh, so it helped me enjoy. And I thought, well, what would my brother want? Well, my brother loves me. My brother would want me to eat my pieces of pie. So that made me, I guess, more comforted to know that, like, it's not wrong to enjoy my life. It's not wrong to, like, it was a lie I was believing that by somehow not eating my pie, I was helping my brother.
Oh, that's great. Thanks. How do you find and cherish moments of joy with Kevin? What are some of the things that you experienced that really you appreciate, or an activity, a routine that have strengthened the bond even at this point, in life that bring you both happiness?
Yeah, that's something I'm working on right now. For the last few years, up until maybe a year and a half ago, I have been fighting for his life. And the only joy I had was like, oh, he's didn't die. And so sorry. I think now I'm looking for that. So recently it's doing things for him that make him smile. makes me happy. It's Secondhand Joy. I'm hoping that's the second book. I don't know. Actually, no book, um, but like I got him a gait trainer. It took me forever, but I got him. It's this thing that he can stand up in. He hasn't stood up since he was a kid, and he's atrophied in his legs. His legs don't move. They're like brittle. They're just. But I know that that was because of atrophy. It wasn't because he was born that way. When he was a kid, he could be in a walker, and I mean, he could never walk, but his legs would move, and he would be strapped in, and his legs don't move now. So I finally got him this thing called a gait trainer, and getting him in that gives me joy. That's one thing, just doing things for him, the communication board. But in terms of fun, one of the things we did in the last 3 years at a golf tournament that his organization sponsors is this really radical nurse decided, would Kevin like to go in a golf cart? I'm like, yeah. And so we kind of broke the rules, and we had people lift him in this golf cart, and I got to ride with him. I'm holding him. He is a caregiver, a direct care staff holding him from the back. And we just rode this. It was the Thousand Oaks golf course, and there's all these hills, and oh my gosh, he laughs so hard. He cackles with joy. And I have a video of it. He's so happy. That was fun. Now, we've only done it once a year. I'd like to do it more. Going to the beach. We did it one time, 2 time-ish together. And one time he was able to, I said, just put him on my lap. And because there's not enough wheelchairs with wheels, to go down there. And so they put him on his lap, and I just leaned back, no support, and I held him. But what I noticed is he has one hand that can move. His hand was feeling the sand, and it was like, oh, and he loved it. He started making this cooing sound when he's happy. And like, he just loved feeling the sand, the warm sand. He was just going through it. And it's like, I'd love to do that more. We've done that once, his whole life. So I would love more of these activities, more of these things where I can just see him laugh and get out in the world. And so that's my hope, by getting him healthy, getting him these tools, that we can do more things like that. But it takes a village. He needs a Hoyer lift to, be lifted, and it's complicated.
I see you've, it really piqued an emotion for you that really brought you to a tearful moment. And I appreciate you sharing that emotion, because that we all feel that, especially me. And Dr. Terry usually teases me that I usually shed a tear while I'm on the podcast. But thank you for and goosebumps too. Yeah, goosebumps too. So thank you, because I feel your excitement and emotion when you share those moments of joy that seem to be happening more as you and your brother move through life. Him being healthier, and you discovering it's the little things that really make them happy. And you know what? For the listening audience, that is probably the greatest take home, because we often think ourselves, what can we do that's exciting? Well, picking up some sand on the beach could be extraordinarily eventful for someone who's not been able to do that before.
Yeah, that's so true.
So thank you.
I got something, whether it's a brother, a child, or something like that, when you have a special child, it's very time consuming. What have you learned to navigate or integrate that into your family, that a husband, a wife, a healthy child doesn't feel that form of jealousy that, well, mom's spending all this time with this person? What have you learned how to make that integration healthy for everybody?
Well, it's interesting because we didn't have that issue because my brother was sent to a different place to live, and that brought its own issues. But I am on a Facebook private group with a bunch of people who are siblings to special needs families. So I'm hearing a lot from the sibling perspective, but I'm also feeling like I connect to the moms, because I'm really kind of mothering my brother. A lot of people say, "Are you his mom?" I'm like, "No, I'm only 3 years older." But what I'm hearing is that very thing, that sometimes in a family with special needs, who is living at home, which is much more common now. It's pretty much everybody does that because they have more support now. The sibling or the the quote that I think the word they're using now is the typical one, neurotypical. I have to learn this whole new language because I wasn't raised in that. But they can feel left out. They can feel invisible. They can feel overlooked. And I'm seeing the consequences of that in this Facebook group I'm on, where these siblings are now adults with their own young children, and their parents are either gone or they're in dementia memory care, and they now have inherited their sibling, and they love them very much, but honestly, it's very difficult. A lot of the autistic diagnoses now, there's some violence for some of them, and they're actually hurting the children of the sibling. And so I'm hearing this a very safe place, like it's a very private group, so people just share everything, and there's a lot of struggles. So I think that the balance is important. Like if we were to do this again and my brother was living at home, I would say, to my parents, hey, let me have a vote younger. Like, let me have a say. Let me voice my feelings at least. Like maybe a 10-year-old can't decide whether my brother gets a G-tube or not, but maybe you can hear my thoughts out. And maybe I don't think that we have junior wisdom. I think that there's wisdom in children too. And like, let them be heard. Let them, because they may be the ones taking care of that special needs person one day. So involve them at an earlier age, and then let them be a part of instead of not going on a family vacation because you can't take Susie, maybe have set up where Susie can get some special care and the family can still go on a vacation, or so the other kids aren't left out. So I'm not sure if that's what you're asking. But I think that the bigger picture is, when one person sucks up all the time and the energy, even with me, my husband sometimes felt abandoned because I was going to take care of Kevin all the time. And if it wasn't Kevin, it was one of my kids. And it's like, well, he has needs too. And, I have felt convicted by that. Yeah, you got to have a balance. Sometimes you just can't do it all. You just have to say, no, I'm sorry, Kevin, you're going to suffer today more than you would have if I was there, but I have a family. And so I think having those boundaries, I read the boundaries book a long time ago, and that has come in handy, I will say.
Well, I think jealousy is a root of a lot of issues. And I just was, to try and nip jealousy in the bud before it becomes a blossom tree, trying to find ways to navigate around it is huge.
Huge. Yeah.
You've had some circumstances that are beyond your control. We've talked about some of you come in just so frustrated. And how do you surrender to that when it's out of your control and cultivate peace in those moments? And what guidance have you learned in this process?
I think that ultimately that is the lesson, is surrender. I think there's a lot of things I've learned I can fight, a lot of things I can change. And I sometimes err on the side of like, I'm going to fix it. Even though my book says like, when you can't fix it, I think I've had some success in fixing some small things that make me think, oh, keep fighting, don't give up. And I agree with that. But I do think you come to a point where you hit a wall. My brother's not talking yet. My brother's not walking yet. He's not, my mom ended up dying of 10 years progressive dementia. I couldn't do it all. And so when you hit that wall, I feel like that's when you come to that point of surrender, and you say, I just surrender. And I have a lot of quotes about surrender. I think surrender plus hunger, meaning for hunger for that transformation of your heart. Like, how do you get peace in the midst of trial? I think when you add surrender and you add that hunger to continue to pursue, not give up, but not saying that you're giving up fixing things, you're giving up having to be in control, and you're having, and that equals the transformation that I went through. And that's a lot of my book is more about a transformation of the heart. And you have to get to the surrender point first. So the beauty of surrender, you kind of have nowhere else to go but God. And for me, and maybe other people come to different conclusions, but I had to come to the point where I got to the end of myself. And there was a moment where my brother I was told he's dying. Literally, the COVID years were horrible, but he had just come out of the hospital, had done a great final recovery. I worked with him and got him out of there. And then because of COVID policies, he had to go to a 10 to 14 day isolation in this place. And he was finally healed. And then he went to this place, and he ended up having I wasn't allowed to see him during COVID. And the only time I could see him is if he was in the hospital. And that was, hazmat suit and the works and all that. And that was even getting in the hospitals. It was difficult because I didn't do all the protocols, right? So you had to find a way to still see your brother. But my brother ended up, because of the isolation, got worse. So he's finally allowed back to his room. And that night I got a call at like 11 at night saying, your brother's oxygen is in the 70s. We called the paramedics. They're here. We want to know what you want to do, because I have a DNR for my brother. And I said, let me talk to the paramedics. And I said, he has been in the hospital. He just got isolation. He's got worse because of that. He's going to be fine. He's not dying. And they said, ma'am, with all due respect, he's dying. And if you don't let us take him to the hospital right now, he's going to die. And it was so mean and it was so horrible. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take that chance. I'm not going back to the hospital after we just spent the last 5 weeks getting him back. Because then if you go to the hospital, you have to isolate for another 10 or 14 days when you get home. And with him alone in a chair, it's wrong. So I knew what I was doing, and I got my dad on the phone and we said, okay, this may be his time. I'm like, we're going to say we trust God and we let him go. And, but in my gut, I knew he wasn't dying. I just knew it. And so they had me go say my goodbyes. They finally let me see my brother in the room, because I couldn't see him inside for almost 3 years. And I was driving on the freeway at 3 a.m. in the morning. No one's out. And I had my surrender with God. And I said, God, I give up. I give up. I can't do this anymore. The COVID thing, Terry saw me during those COVID years. It was just so maddening. Like I couldn't even be with my brother. And I surrendered. And then I got to the hospital room. They let me in, because I guess if you're dying, you can see your loved one. Think of that. So, and I was quietly, the lights were out. They're trying to let him sleep, get his oxygen back up. And I sit with him for like 2.5 hours, and I'm just like playing like soft music and just like telling him I love him and all this stuff. And then I shine my light on the, I'm trying to go, because I'm tired at this point. I want to go back to bed. And I shine my light on and I look at him, and his face is laughing he's cracking up. He's laughing at me like I'm saying goodbye to him dying. He's like, oh my gosh, Kevin, I knew you were going to die. And he was just laughing his head off. I'm like, you know what? I'm so glad he didn't go to the hospital. Anyway, I could go on and on, but I think the surrender is so important. And it's like from that surrender, actually, we broke through this wall and we found hope again. And so it kind of combines the trust your gut, the advocacy, and the willing to give it all up. And, he was fine.
He can hear you, yes? He can hear you perfectly well?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just his ability to respond is
Yeah.
always a little different.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a heck of a story.
The whole time you're telling a story, I'm watching my partner, and his eyes are big, his mouth is big, and I go, you know what? If he wasn't wearing such a tight shirt, you see all the hair prickling up, because he's had that on him. For those who are just starting this process, the things you've learned, you fought and fought and fought, and yes, you have. We'll put a link to your book in the description, but for those people that haven't obviously read it yet, instead of saying, well, it's in the book, I want you to talk to people that may be tuning in for this for the first time and are going, oh my God, I'm going through this right now. What have you learned through some of these challenging times? You talked about when we first started about the fights you've had to have when they're not living at your house. So if you have somebody can you just give us some things that you've learned that maybe you would have done different in the beginning, when you first got it, that you would do, that you've learned through this process, that you would, if you went back in time, you would maybe do different? What's some things you've kind of learned through this process for somebody starting out?
I think a lot of that is summarized in my chapter titles, actually, which you can even just see, by looking at Amazon or something without buying the book. But I think one of the big things is, starting with the premise of like life's not fair. And I think for me, we all grow up thinking life should be fair. I don't know where we get that, but it's an innate sense that, yeah, there is justice, there is goodness, and like we know, like when things are wrong, it's a problem. But I think the if I had to say one thing that, based on your question, I would say the whole not everybody that says they're an expert is an expert. Like I feel like we are our own experts, and to trust yourself more, that intuitive. We don't have to be a doctor to kind of figure some things out. We have the internet now. Like there's and it's worth it. It's worth it to dig in. Now, some people's personalities are not like mine, and I have another brother who's healthy, and he's a really good guy. He'll come if I call him, and he'll help. But we're wired differently, and so I don't want to put the guilt on someone to say like, well, you got to do what I did, because I mean, I'm kind of insane a little bit. So, but I think, just trust. You have a voice. Your voice is important. I think also empathy, the lesson of empathy. For me, I wasn't always this empathetic. I talk about empathy as a discipline. It's not just a feeling. One of my stories in my book I talk about is I became my brother for one day when I was in college. I was a sociology major, and we had come up with some study for a big thesis of something social science related, stand in an elevator, different elevators, and face backwards and see what people, say, and document it and do a whole project. Well, I decided I wanted to become my brother and see what it was like to be disabled and no voice. And so that was a whole thing I write about. I think what it did is it really helped me. We kind of fooled the whole day program staff. It was only one person who knew. And I came in and I had to really become like an actress and become in my brother's body and feel what he feels. And what would Kevin do? And of course, they ended up shoving my worst favorite food in my mouth for lunch, like stewed tomatoes. And I'm like, oh, and like, what does Kevin do? Well, he would spit it out. I spit it out all over them, So it just learning empathy. Like sometimes we think we want to avoid the pain and I can't deal with it. Like, let's pray for him, or, but I feel like there's a gift when you become so empathetic for someone that you love. To me, the gift, it can be summarized in my favorite line from Les Mis, if you can remember it, but to love another person is to see the face of God. And when we truly love someone, I think that involves empathy. I think that involves we feel their pain. I think that involves we step in their shoes. And for me, that's the feeling when I became closest to God. When I was sitting by what I thought was my dying brother, I never felt closer to God. I was like, there's a sacred holiness in this space right now. And it's when we let ourselves love someone so deep that it hurts, secondhand suffering, the benefit you would never know until you experience it. The benefit is like, oh my gosh, I feel that connection to God. And so I would say don't avoid the empathy, like nurture it. And you, of course, there's all the balance, take care of yourself and the boundaries and all that. But I do think that there is good to come from suffering. I mean, think of it one of the greatest people, whether you believe he's God or not, doesn't matter. The Bible verse is Jesus wept. Like here, this great man of God, wept. And I feel like if he can do it, like when we block ourselves from that ability to feel, I feel like it's we're missing out. We're missing out on this feeling of connecting to the heart of God. And it's hard to describe what benefit that is. I just think it makes us better people and on earth. So
yeah. I think Dave, did you want to say something, David?
Oh no, I was gonna say the ability to be good is like a muscle. It hurts at first when you work out, but once you get good at it, you get good.
There you go.
There you go.
Good.
It's interesting because my brother and I were just talking about, there was a study done with bottles of water, with water that was in a bottle, that if over a period of time, if you said the words of love and compassion and devotion to the water bottle.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know about this? And then
I've heard about that. Yeah.
the alternate was the water bottle that you would express hate and anger
Yeah.
and affliction and so on. And what they did was they would freeze the water and put it under the microscope, and you would see two completely different crystals. You would see, disoriented crystals with no defined borders versus the bottle of love and compassion had really beautiful, elegant, very defined crystals. So there's something to be said. It makes you really, when you live a compassionate and loving life, it can really um, inspire the person that is receiving that kind of love. And at the same time, I was telling my brother that I actually have developed compassion for bugs. When as a kid, we would smack and kill the bug, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing? And
Yeah.
over did, over my recent life, I've spared the mosquito that was sucking the blood out of me, just to
Buddy.
get off instead of smashing. It's things like that we take for granted. So thank you for sharing
You-
such
Why
love
we don't
and
live
compassion.
why we don't live in Florida, Camille.
Well, I'm laughing because I'm thinking you must have done some inner work, Dr. Barron, because
Yes.
it's a little more unusual for men. You reminded me of a story of my girls. My kids were really little, and my girls found this beautiful caterpillar outside, and they were watching. Oh, look at all the legs and look at the color. They're like fascinated. And my youngest son comes up, he's like 2, and he's like, "What are you guys looking at?" And then they showed him. He's like, "Oh," and he steps on it. So you've done some inner work on you.
I have, and those were also just self-revelation things that realizing that it's so much easier to love, and and I'm off track sometimes. There's some anger and animosity that comes up, but I have to remind myself and surround yourself with the people that function like you do, and by the way, Dr. Terry, we don't have scorpions in South Florida, so we'll go there. All right. Right, Dave. There you go.
Yeah, you just have what we would call hummingbirds. You call bugs. They're huge.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, Camille, we're going to move right into our rapid fire questions. Some of the more fun things that we can share and talk about. We have 5 questions for you that we would love to answer. Got to be quick on your feet though, and if you're ready for question number 1.
Okay.
Ready?
I don't know.
If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be, and what question would you most likely want to ask them?
Oh gosh, I have so many people, but I have to go. I just have to go with Jesus. I'm sorry, it's probably the most popular answer, but no. I think I have a list for God. My friend and I, we joke all these crazy things that happen in the world, and we're like, I get we have free will, and I get God's not controlling everything, causing all this bad. I actually have come to believe that after a lot of search, but I do have some questions, really, God, why? And I would have all my why questions. I would want to know, couldn't you just stepped in on that one? Couldn't you have? So I think I would be a little raw with him, and I think he can take it. So that would probably be my dinner. Or Jesus.
Very good. And by the way, that is not the common answer. So.
Oh, really?
You still maintain your uniqueness with your answer. Yes.
All right, I'll take that.
What's a hobby? Ready? What's a hobby or interest you might have that would surprise those who know you primarily through your work?
Ooh. A hobby I currently have, or a hobby I might want to have?
Oh, no, either one. What would surprise people?
Well, what would surprise people is my husband and I are trying to learn how to be beekeepers, which is, we've killed 2 hives now. So I'm not sure if we can try it 3 times. We're not really good at it.
The charm.
Well,
Right.
we'll see if he ordered them or not this year. But yeah, they both swarmed and left, and things killed. I don't know. So yeah, that's probably the hobby that I'm not sure I wanted, but he kind of got me into it. And I like honey, and I think it has good enzymes. So it's like I'm open, but it is not easy.
Maybe you should tell the bees you love them. I love you.
There's something to that. There's something. We co-parent bees. We have my friend's bees in our yard,
There you
and
go.
she wants me to talk to them because she used to sing to them before they came in my backyard. And I'm like, I just can't. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. But it does make a difference, like your water. It does.
Wow, I love it.
They get to know your voice.
It's funny because all I think of is that movie Beekeeper that came,
Right.
came out. That was just complete antithesis of,
Right.
That's why I
right.
haven't watched it yet. I heard it wasn't really about beekeeping. But
it was pretty cool. I mean, I like that kind of movie. Anyway,
okay.
question number 3. Is there a particular place in the world that holds a special meaning for you, and why would that be?
These are good questions. I tried to figure out what you're going to ask me, and I failed on all 3 so far. Special place. You know what? I think it's Pepperdine University. I don't know. I every time I go there, I was raised there. My dad was a professor there. Recruited from Arkansas, Tennessee, and I was there at 2 years old, running around that place. I know. My husband and I met there. We got engaged there. My dad, I grew up my whole life going to Pepperdine. We went to church there. I go to that campus to this day. I feel at home. I feel like I'm in my womb there. It's just a very special place to me.
That is great. Good.
I did not know that. All the time knowing you, I did not know that. That's
cool. I was there before it was born, Malibu. We used to meet in the Civic Center in Malibu as a kid. I had my birthday party there at Sunday school and when I was 4, and my dad was a part of the founding professors at Pepperdine. Wow. He started the business division there. He wasn't even a business guy, but he self-taught and he was recruited. He knew somebody and was a part of the whole founding of the campus. I've known all the presidents personally by name. They're all at my wedding. Yeah, very, very close connection. I don't do anything with them right now, but it's a special place to me.
Fantastic. Question number 4. What's a book or a movie that has profoundly impacted you on, and what was your takeaway from it?
I got a serious movie and I got a funny movie. I'll just go with my theme of my book. Everything's serious, right? But you could tell I don't want to always be heavy, but this movie did profoundly impact me. It was The Shack. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
No.
It was Lionsgate produced. A friend of mine actually is the producer who did it all. But I went to support my friend and I came away blown away. And it spoke, it was actually the biggest catalyst. I write about in my book too, but it's the biggest catalyst in my shift to a head to a heart connection with all my questions with God, like with my deepest anger with God, my deepest sadness with God. It dealt with it. And my favorite quote from it is when one of the characters who's playing God, it's all fictional, characters revolving around a tragedy that happens in this shack with this one guy who's like angry at God, and they're having this conversation. And the person playing God says, I can work together incredible good in the tragedies, but I don't orchestrate the tragedies. I bawled. When I heard that, I bawled. It's like, oh my gosh. And I know it's fiction. I know it's a movie. I know it's an interpretation, but honestly, it gelled with my spirit so deeply because so much of my life people said, oh, well, God must have a plan, or he's in control, or he causes for Kevin for a reason. I'm like, blah, I don't like any of that. And when that character said that, it's like, wow, this shift happened and it was so profound. So that's probably my favorite, most impactful movie. My favorite just to laugh is Meet the Parents. I just think that's hilarious. And I just laugh so hard at that movie.
Very good. Question number 5, last one. If you could instantly acquire a new skill or a talent, what would it be, and how do you think it would enrich your life?
Oh my gosh. Oh, these are hard. New skill or talent. Oh, I want to my skill, I'd like to recall everything I've learned because I'm a learner. I have books everywhere. I have underlines in everything. I have notes every Sunday at church. I take notes. I go to conferences. I go to workshops. I do internet class. I write it all down. I underline it. And I can't remember. Like right now, I'm like, I there's so many things I know. I'm like, I should have said this. But I can't recall everything. So I'd love to have perfect recall, perfect memory, the ability to take everything I've ever learned and actually use it and make it practical and help people. Wow. That's what I come up with.
Get hearing aids.
I don't want them. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to grow back those cilia in my ears.
I had to go there. Thanks. Oh, Camille, thank you so much. Those were great. Great answers. Great. You've definitely brought us through all the emotions. I appreciate that.
You need to laugh. You need to laugh.
We need to laugh. We need to cry. We need to embrace all the emotions we have in life. And thank you so much for taking us on this journey. Yes, of course, the book, for people listening, please go look at the description. Will be a link there, but just to listen to your voice and hearing your stories and your journey, I just so appreciate you and love you. So thank you for taking this time to take us on this journey, and hopefully these words fall on ears that need to hear these words. So thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Appreciate it. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Crackin Backs Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Crackin Backs Podcast. Catch new episodes every Monday. See you next time.